Leah, I was just sharing some of the tips that you're going to be sharing with us. So I'm so excited to have you on because, again, this is such a big topic for so many people. So thank you so much for coming on and hanging out with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I'll just share a little bit about Leah. I'll just read her little bio and then we'll get started with everything. So Leah Hadley is committed to helping clients transition through divorce as painlessly as possible. Founder and president of Great Lakes Divorce Financial Solutions and Great Lakes Investment Management. Leah is a certified divorce financial analyst and master analyst in financial forensics. She began her career in financial services more than 10 years ago. Leah has firsthand knowledge of the pitfalls of divorce process, given her own divorce and that of her parents when she was 8 years old. She is passionate about offering resources that saves clients time and money, and most importantly, ensures financial confidence in the next phase of life. She works with clients throughout the divorce process to assist in evaluating divorce settlement options. After divorce, Leah educates and empowers clients to make wise financial decisions. Leah is an adoptive mom of 3 children and is actively involved in her community. She can frequently be found out at PTA, Girl Scouts, and Cub Scouts. So you are a busy lady.
Yeah, I was at Girl Scouts earlier tonight.
Wow, and then you still have time and energy to do this with us. So that's awesome. Thank you.
I don't know how much energy I have, but
I hear you. I definitely hear you. So tell us a little bit more about your background. What got you so interested in helping people through the divorce process and the money thing? Because again, that is such a major, major issue that so many people have come to the table with.
absolutely. Yeah. So I was working as just a traditional financial advisor. And one of the things that I was finding pretty consistently with my divorcing clients, particularly women, I saw it, was that after the divorce, they were just blowing through their assets. And it was, a lot of people talk about the cost of the divorce itself. But I think what people aren't talking about is how very poor planning during the divorce process can have a huge impact on you for many years to come. And so it really, really bothered me to see this pattern. And then one of my friends is a family law attorney, introduced me to the idea of a collaborative divorce and kind of the role that a financial neutral can play in that process. And then I just started learning more and more about how I could support people through this process and how much good planning during the process can have such a lasting impact on people's lives. And it's been an awesome ride.
That's great. And the fact that you can empathize, being that your parents got a divorce and then you yourself went through a divorce, we know how difficult it can be when you're struggling to figure it out.
Absolutely. It's scary. I mean, there's so many changes that are going on during your life when you're going through a divorce. And one of the most frightening things is if you aren't responsible for the finances in your relationship, and suddenly you're taking on that responsibility for the first time, and you're already in an emotional state, and now you have to learn all about, and it can be simple things, but if you're not used to paying the bills and you're not used to interacting with online banking and this kind of a thing, it's a lot to learn during such a difficult time in your life.
Yeah, and again, and it really doesn't even matter if it's actually a divorce or just breaking up with someone. I mean, a lot of times there is more one person that does the finances than the other ones. And then even if, God forbid, everything is great and something bad happens to one of you, you still have to learn how to do it. So it's so important for both parties to know, where is the money going? Where is it coming from? What different accounts do we have? What are the different investments that we have? Those are all things that are really, really important. And it's also good to be really upfront because, then there can be some of that sneakiness that goes on and that distrust. And when it comes to money, that can become a major issue also.
Absolutely. It can be such a huge issue in a relationship. And you're exactly right. A lot of times when somebody loses their spouse, and it could have been a very healthy relationship, and they were together for years and years and years, and then suddenly, maybe they're in their 60s, they're in their 70s, they're in their 80s, and it's the first time they're having to deal with their finances. Again, it's the absolute worst time to have to learn it. I always tell people, though, everybody has to learn it at some point in their life and not to feel embarrassed, because that's the one thing that a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, oh, I should know this or I should know that. Okay, well, now it's time to learn it. So even though, that you could kind of shit all over yourself, as they say, right? But the reality is it's everybody has to learn it at some point. So whether you learn it as a kid, a teenager, or you're learning it, in your middle of your life or late in life, everybody's capable of learning it. You have to be patient with yourself sometimes and recognize that it might not come easily, but you can learn it. And just give yourself the time to figure things out.
Yeah, excellent. So I guess we'll get started. So let's hear these tips. So your first one that you wanted to share was getting organized. So what do you want to share with us? Because that sounds like that can be overwhelming for some people.
It can be. It can be very overwhelming for some people. So these were like 5 steps. I recently wrote a blog post about this, that when you're coming out of a relationship, and in particular, an abusive relationship, because a lot of times, if you're in a relationship where one partner has more control, you're really creating an entirely new financial foundation for yourself, right? So this is a situation where you really have not had any involvement in the money whatsoever, and these were kind of 5 steps to get you on the path to having that solid foundation going forward. So the first step is just to gather the information. And so for some people, this may be as easy as going into a filing cabinet or going online and downloading some statements. And for other people, it's going to be trickier. But you want to gather all of your important documents, things like passports, birth certificates, social security cards, these kinds of things, tax returns. You want to have copies of every basically important financial document in your life, right? And find a place to store them. So if you can store them at home, that's great. But sometimes people are in a situation where they're trying to prepare for the next phase of their life, and they haven't informed their partner yet, and they're kind of trying to keep things quiet for one reason or another. And so it's about finding someplace safe to keep these documents. So it could be a trusted family member, it could be a trusted friend, it might be a bank safety deposit box. It kind of depends on your unique situation. But the first point is just to gather the information. And sometimes people are in a place where they honestly don't even know where they do their banking. They may be in a relationship where they get an allowance each week or each month, and that's kind of their extent or experience with the finances. So there's things that you can do, kind of pay attention to the mail coming into the house, statements coming into the house, that kind of a thing. And if you're in a situation where asking a lot of questions is going to create additional problems in the relationship, then it might not be the right time to kind of rock the boat as it relates to that, but to gather the information that you are able to access. Now, if you're able to communicate, or you're still trying to make things work, then I encourage you to be absolutely completely involved in the finances. And even if maybe you're not the primary earner, or you're not the one paying the bills, you should still be talking with your partner about what are your financial goals? What is our budget? Kind of what is the money going in? Where's the money going out? What kind of accounts do we have? What kind of retirement savings do we have? And planning those goals together is a really important step in creating a strong, healthy foundation in that relationship anyway. But assuming that you're not in that position and you're not able to openly ask those questions, then you want to just make sure that you're collecting the information and kind of storing it away in a place where you're going to have access to it. You're going to have time to go through it. Or if you need to meet with a professional, you can take those documents to a professional in order to be able to work with them. There's great ways to store things electronically now, so you don't even necessarily have to have like a physical space for a lot of this information, but it can be electronic storage. But the idea is basically to collect all of your financial information.
And it's funny because you're saying that, and it's kind of bringing back memories for myself as well, because even though for me, I was lucky enough that I was the main breadwinner, and I was the one, making the money and paying most of the bills, I still wanted to make sure that I had copies of all of those things. So I would go during my free time if my significant other wasn't there, and I got paperwork, made copies, and put it back and had it in a safe place so that I had copies of everything in case I had to leave. It was part of like my escape bag, was to be prepared for whatever happened, a little bit of cash, all of my things filed away. And that way I knew that if I needed to just go, I could just go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. So we're up to number 2 then, I guess. Taking a financial inventory.
Yeah. So once you've gathered all of your information, you want to kind of take stock in what your situation is, right? So take a look at what are the types of accounts that you have, and look at how things are titled. Now, if you're in a situation, so a lot of times people will come to me when they are contemplating a divorce and they want to know, well, what will they be entitled
Yeah.
to? And I always like to let people know because sometimes they're is some misinformation about there. Like if that's not in my name, so for example, retirement accounts are going to be in one person's name or the other person's name, then they may think that they're not entitled to any portion of that account because it's not in their name. But assets that are accumulated during the marriage are considered to be assets of the marriage. And regardless of the state that you live in, it doesn't matter how the account is actually titled in those cases. You're still looking at the overall marital estate. But you want to document it for yourself. So you want to know, okay, we have this checking account. Is it a joint checking account? Are both names on that account? Or is it in his name or in her name? And get specifically, detailed around how these accounts are titled. It's going to include credit cards. And a lot of times people are interesting. They may not actually remember how things are titled. We got that credit card 10 years ago, and they may think, I'm a joint owner in that account, but they may actually just be an authorized user on that account. Well, if there's an authorized user on the account and they don't actually have any ownership on that account, the other person can call the credit card company and have that authorized user removed from the account. And so it's important to understand what is your name actually on, so you could access at any time versus, if you were to get frozen out of your account, where's the risk, I guess. And so taking that inventory, but also things like insurance. So part of that collecting all those documents, you're going to be looking at insurance. Where's my car insurance from? Where's my health insurance? Do I have it through my employer? Do I have it through my spouse's employer? Do I have like a private plan? Where is my coverage coming from? What kind of life insurance benefits do we have? Do we have just the group policy through employers? Do we have separate policies? Are they permanent? Are they temporary? So gathering all of that information is going to be really helpful down the road. And it also allows you to see kind of where the holes are. For example, one that comes up very consistently in my cases is the issue around health insurance. And typically, if both parties are employed, one party has the better health insurance. And so both people end up on, one of the parties' health insurance plans. So that means that once everything is final, that they are actually going to somebody's going to have to get new health insurance, whether it's through their employer or through a private plan, what have you. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting that's come up in some of my cases is there are actually employers out there who, if the parties are separated, so not divorced, but they are married and they separate, then it's at the time of separation that that person loses the health insurance. So it's important to know what your health care coverage is because, if you are planning to leave, for example, that may be the point at which you need to have your own health insurance. And I actually have a client, unfortunately, who had quite a bit of a surgery and some different, recovery therapy during her separation, and is now finding out that that was the case on her particular health insurance plan. And now she's getting all these surprise medical bills in the mail. So taking this financial inventory and really understanding what your coverage is, and where there's holes, where there's risk, where you need, you want to address is a really important step to building that overall foundation.
And the health insurance, I'm nodding my head a lot as you're saying that because I've spoken to so many people recently as well that they don't have a job, they have health issues, and so they're staying because of the insurance. And even though it's toxic and it's making them sick and it's just terrible, they're so afraid to leave because they're not going to have the benefits that they have if they stayed with their spouse.
Yeah. Now, I do always like to remind people, so a lot of times people are familiar with COBRA in the case of changing a job. So if you were to change jobs and you had health insurance with your current employer, and you left your current employer, or even let's say you became unemployed, you would have 18 months of COBRA available to you. So you would be able to purchase the health insurance plan. You have to pay the portion of the premium that the employer was paying, but you can stay on that plan for 18 months. If you're getting divorced, you can actually stay for up to 3 years. So you do have a longer period of time where you can get the COBRA if you need it. But it's expensive in a lot of cases.
Yeah, yeah, Cobra's definitely not cheap. So, and it's rough because if someone gets money, gets insurance through the state, it's not going to be the same kind of insurance that they're getting from an employer. So, I can see that's an issue. It's a shame, realistically, but that's a whole other conversation to have. All right, so I guess we'll go then to number 3, establish your own financial identity.
Right. So as you're doing this inventory, you may realize that you don't actually have a lot of financial information or accounts that is established in your own name. And so a lot of times, especially if somebody got married very young, and they've been married for a long time, they may find that they really don't have any of their own credit history at all. And it's really important to have a good credit history if you're going to want to apply for a loan in the future or apply for renting an apartment even. It's really important to establish that credit history. So there's a couple of things. Number one, you do want to have a bank account that's going to be in your own name. And so you may have a joint account, but you want to have one that's going to be in your own name, especially if you're in a situation where you're planning to leave. You want to actually make sure you have some, the account is funded and you have some access to money just in case, because it does happen where people get frozen out of account, and you want to make sure that you're going to be, covered in terms of that. So have an account in your own name. Also, have a credit card in your own name. So I'm not suggesting that you go out and, charge a whole bunch of stuff, which could be very tempting if you're kind of in this stage of, wanting to start over and doing this. I'll tell you, when I got divorced myself, I bought all new bedroom furniture. And while I absolutely love it, and I love that I changed my whole room, I really wish that I hadn't spent that money at that time, because it was a very bad timing to be spending that amount of money. But at any rate, try not to use it, for any large purchases, but maybe, to fill up gas in your car or to make, grocery purchases, but something that you're going to pay off every month. So you don't want to create any new bills for yourself, but you do want to establish a credit history. So if you don't have a credit card, get a credit card in your name, and make some small purchases on it and just keep paying it off every month. Make sure you make your payments on time every single month. That's going to help you to, start to build on that history, and build that financial identity. Now, I do tell people, again, you don't want to raise any red flags if you're in a situation where it's going to become a problem. If you guys haven't talked about the separation, or if you're in a situation that's unsafe. And so you want to be aware of anything that you're doing that's going to create mail coming into your house. And so you may want to establish a PO box for yourself. For example, when you do open a bank account, you are required to provide a physical address. So you can't give them a PO box as your address, but you can give them that for your mailing address. And, if you have a trusted family member or a trusted friend, that you could use their address, something like that. But just to be aware of that, anytime you're interacting with a financial institution, opening those accounts, it does create mail.
Okay, excellent. That's great. All right, so the next one, create a spending plan.
Okay, so this is where, a lot of people hate that word budget. So I'm referring to it as a spending plan, but that's really what a budget is, right? So it's knowing what your sources of income are. And so it might be your income, it might be your spouse's income, if you have investment income or you get any public assistance, there's all different kinds of income. But take an inventory, where's your income coming from? And what are your expenses? And not only what are your expenses now, but any of the changes that you're planning to make, what's that going to mean in terms of actual dollars, okay? So you don't want to get yourself in a situation, and I see this all the time, where people are in such a rush to get out. It happens a lot with infidelity in particular. Something happens, they find out about an affair or something like that, and then suddenly they're in this huge rush to get out, and they don't take the time to really think about contracts they're signing and this kind of a thing. And so they end up in a place where it's going to be way more than what they can afford on an ongoing basis because they were just really anxious to get out of the situation. And then, 6 months down the road, when you're paying more for a place that you couldn't afford to begin with, suddenly you're getting into a deeper and deeper hole, and it's really a problem. So you want to make sure that you understand what your expenses are, and then if you're planning any new expenses, that you have the income to cover it. The other issue that is such a challenge, and it's so heartbreaking for me when I do a lot of work with couples as well as individuals, but couples who are more amicable, where they just want to work with one person to help them kind of divide things up, I'll work with them. And then with the individuals, I work more as a supporter and advocate for them. But when I have couples who come to me and we're looking at all of their income and we're looking at all these new expenses, you're going to be paying for two households now instead of the one household, and the income isn't changing, something is probably going to have to change. In most cases, it's going to have to be for both parties, and it's going to be uncomfortable. It's hard, especially there's so many people who I see who are living beyond their means on two incomes as it is. And now we're going to try to fund two households. I have some attorneys who refer clients to me, and I kind of joke with them, like, I can't create money for people. I mean, I would not, I would probably not have to work if I could do that, right? But it's a heartbreaking situation because there are some very tough choices that need to be made. But I think that's what's so important about that spending plan, is to really have a good understanding of what you need in order to be able to make ends meet. And then if there's some changes that need to be made, and certainly if there are any new financial commitments that you're taking on, that you kind of thought through the consequences of those commitments. And then the last one is really about comparing. So you've looked at your income, you've looked at your expenses, you have this plan. Is there a gap? So sometimes we're looking at the bare minimum expenses and we're finding, this income is not going to cover these expenses. And then we have to talk about new sources of income. And that might mean taking on some additional hours at work, or, looking for a better paying job, or taking on some side work, or this kind of a thing. But it's really important to solve for this gap, because a lot of times people are so overwhelmed with all the emotion and all the changes in their life that they're just going to keep putting this stuff on a credit card and putting this stuff on a credit card. And then one day it all hits the fan and you have a much bigger problem than if we kind of are more proactive and creating this solid foundation for yourself, and really addressing that gap up front.
Yeah, and one of the things that I recommend even to my clients is to look at, every once in a while, I just do this little inventory anyway of calling up like cable and saying, hey, cable, I think
Absolutely.
I need all of these extra whatevers, and taking that off, or calling my phone company and saying, hey, Verizon, I don't think I need all these other things, and trying to see if I can lower it down if there's a new plan. Or so there might be things. And then I think even looking at we get so sucked into these things that we want that we forget that we don't actually need all of those things.
Right.
So, like, what are the needs and wants? What are the things that we can get rid of that are really not that important? And what are the have-tos? Like, what are the list of things that we have to survive? You have to have a place to live. You depending on where you are, if you're in the city, you might not need a car. Maybe you get rid of the car. But if you're not in the city, you probably need a car. So there's certain things that you can get rid of, and actually make it a little bit easier for you, especially for those people that are in a situation where maybe they haven't been working. So going back to work means making very small amounts of money, and it's going to be difficult to figure out how to meet it. I mean, and that's the reality, but it's a good idea to start thinking about it.
Yeah. So I always encourage, the one that I always encourage people is to call your car insurance every 2 years to shop around your car insurance, because you would be surprised at how much you can save. So it can be a pretty big bill for people, especially if you're paying it every single month. And that can drop substantially. If you call every couple of years, just shop your rate around. And that's a big one. And then there's also, I can't think of the company right now, but a lot of times people are subscribing to all kinds of services nowadays, whether they're doing it through Amazon or they're doing it through, iTunes or whatever it is. And then they're not even using it. And it may be $3 here, $5 here, $10 here, but it really adds up, especially when it's a monthly charge. And so going through and making sure that the things that you're not using are canceled is really good.
And I'll even add, I actually have my credit cards on auto payment, and over the summer, I just happened to look at my credit card bill, and I don't even know why, because I normally just, it's on auto payment. Why should I be worried about it? And I started looking through, and the credit card company had actually made a mistake. So they were charging me $20 a month as a fee for not paying on time because they had not correctly put the decimal point in the right place or something ridiculous. And so I don't even know how many months they had been overcharging me and making my credit look like I wasn't paying on time. And I was very upset. I had to call like 4 times because they weren't figuring out how to fix it. And it ended up that the last person fixed it. But had I not checked, that could have gone on for months and months and really messed things up. So really making sure that you're on top of, even my son, not very recently, he's 2.5, somehow subscribed to something. And all of a sudden, I'm like, what's this $10 charge for? Like, he just
Right.
something and he has no idea. So those like little things, and then all of a sudden, and I remember one time when I did that, what my regular just check-ins, and it was almost $100 that was just being sucked out of my account that I didn't even realize was going anywhere because it was $10, $5, $20,
Right.
and it adds up really, really quickly.
It does. I had a similar experience on my cell phone bill. I didn't realize that I was getting charged every month. And I had called about it and I had thought that it gotten fixed. And then I noticed that my bill hadn't gone down. And I had to call, actually, I think it was 3 times total to finally get the issue fixed. But it was just something that they had in their system incorrectly. And so I was getting charged every month. And so you're exactly right. You got to take a look at those bills and make sure you're keeping an eye on them for sure.
Now, I have a question because, and I don't know if this person is watching, but in one of my groups, they were actually saying that um, there's an issue with the house, and their husband left the house, but she's basically not going to be able to stay because she can't afford the payments. How do you know approximately how long the significant other is there a time limit of when someone has to pay still their share, or like what do you know? And I know that's more of a legal question than maybe as much of a money question, but how do people figure that out? Because like, do both people have to, do you have to sell the house and then, or if someone's staying there, how do you figure out who pays for what? Do you know how that works?
Right. Yeah, so it's a good question, and it is something that does differ a little bit from state to state. So it is important to check with an attorney on the specific laws of the state. But as far as an individual who currently is in a home with a mortgage on it, so they have a house payment, one of the things that we often look at, and so one of the things that you said that I was is the certified divorce financial analyst. And so one of the reasons somebody might work with a CDFA is the acronym, is to come up with creative solutions, things that you may want to change about your existing situation, essentially to reach whatever it is, whatever the goals are that you're trying to reach. So we look at all different kinds of creative solutions when it comes to the house. Now, there are a lot of times where I will tell somebody, if you can't afford to stay in your house, don't stay in your house because you're just creating a bigger problem for yourself down the road. With that said, sometimes you're 20 years into your 30-year mortgage and you're still paying on your house. You might be able to take on a new 30-year mortgage. You might be able to refinance the house and end up with a payment that you can actually afford. And so that's a simple solution for some, certain situations. But that's a case where it really is going to be case by case. It's also going to be state by state in terms of, how long that person was away from the home, how, there's a variety of different issues that come up around the house. It's not uncommon for people to ultimately have to sell it, especially if they need to pay out the equity to the other partner. So let's say, that they have some kind of a property settlement where they're dividing the equity that was in the house, and they're not going to have a way to pay that out any other way. They may have to sell the house. But there are a lot of people who find ways to stay in their homes, and we come up with all kinds of creative ways to do that. There's things that we look at it like them continuing to jointly own the house, and creating some documentation around that. So there's different types of agreements that can come up.
And I'll just say too, I think that, for me, I like with every bad relationship, I was the one who owned the house already. So I ended up staying in the house. But when things went bad, I was the one who left. And it gave me my power back to be able to say, I wasn't waiting for someone else to leave. I was the one leaving. And I think for a lot of times that's actually a really good decision, because if not, the other person's going to try to get you back in and let's do this drama all over again and keep the cycle going. But I think there's a little
Yeah.
freedom
I have
in leaving, and not just leaving, but like getting rid of the house, because that's all that old energy, all those memories, all those things. And if you're able to stay with a friend, get a roommate, do all those things. And I know with kids, I get it. It's way more difficult. But if there's another way to do it where you don't have to stay in that place and you can be in a different location and the other person doesn't know where you are, even if it was a healthy, breakup or divorce, it's kind of like you want your own space and you don't want that to come into your space anymore. And so stop, kind of let go a little bit and just say, and allow the freedom of not having to worry about that anymore and just let it go. And I'm not saying don't pay for it, but I'm saying just don't hold on so tight, because I think a lot of times we hold on tight, like, I need the house, I need to stay in the house.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that is a very, very common one that comes up. And I get it because when there is you feel like the ground is literally coming out from beneath you. And at least you know you have your home to go back to, right? I mean, with all of the changes that are happening in your life, that home and can be it really anchoring you, right? And so I absolutely understand why that can be so difficult to let go. But I have a client who she's been divorced for years now, but she's finally getting ready to sell her house. And, the way that she talks about it, I love it because she just lights up, because it's exactly what you were talking about. It's this release of that negative energy, those memories. Like she's in a good space. She's ready to move on. And it's just very empowering, to really to go find the place that is the perfect place for you. And her son pointed out this will be the first time that she is getting her own place. And so it's really an exciting opportunity. And I try to encourage people to look at it as an opportunity. So, it is, I'm not going to take away how difficult it is, because it is emotionally a very difficult time, but it is also creating a whole new chapter in your life. And you can make that chapter look like you want it to look. And to really take control over that and say, you know what, this chapter is going to be more about me, and what do I want for my life, and what are my goals, and what's going to help me to get there. And even if you have young children, because I know a lot of times people are always talking about, well, I don't want to move because I don't want to disrupt the kids and this kind of a thing. But when you are, in the best place that you can be in, you're able to be a better parent to your children. And so they see that.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And there's not, they don't have to worry about the arguing and watching the toxicity, because kids will repeat that. It's not what you say, it's what you do. So if you're able to leave, and as much as that might be uncomfortable and you're concerned for the children and everything else, staying in it is not better for them. Having them watch it and
Right.
participate in it is not going to be good for anybody. And staying in it for the house and the finances, we've got to stop that and look at other ways that are more creative to get away and not have that be your reason to stay in fear. Because there's the fear of what we don't know, but there's the fear of what we know. So let's just
Right.
move past it and then move on to the next level of our life, because if not, you're not going to be able to move on to the next place.
Absolutely.
So are there any questions that anybody has for Leah while we're here? Because we're going to be finishing up, but I'd like to make sure that we open it up for anyone that does have any questions, because she is here for you. And again, I know that this topic really hits close to home for so many people. And it doesn't matter if it's male or female. It's both perspectives, obviously. So, if there's anything that you'd like to ask, this is a great opportunity to ask the expert. And again, just as a reminder, you do want to, I know there's people watching from all over the world, because we have people from everywhere, which is so cool. So just really make sure that whether you're in America, whatever state you're in, wherever you are in the world, just make sure you know what the local laws are. Know what is allowed specifically where you are, because it might be similar, but it might be a little bit different. So now you have a little bit of an idea of specifically things to look out for, and that's going to be kind of universal. what paying the house bills, the more, your insurance, all that kind of stuff. But there's certain things that might be specific to your state or to your country. So just make sure you know that for your area.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
is there anything you want to share? Because there's a little bit of a lag, so there might be questions that come up, but is there anything that you want to share as your final thoughts before we say goodbye to?
Yeah, a couple things. So one, I'm glad that you made the statement about, whether it's a man or a woman, if you have a question or if you have a concern. I'll be honest, when I started my business, I thought that I was going to be primarily working with women. And what I have found is there are lots and lots of men out there who have the same financial concerns as the women. And so, even if you're the breadwinner, this is a huge change in your life. And so, just that sort of unknown factor and having that confidence in your financial future, it's a concern for everybody. And one of the things that I have found is when people have more confidence financially, they have a better understanding of their situation, they have a real plan going forward. Um, some of the divorce process in particular becomes much more straightforward and less emotional because you really can fall back on some very concrete information in order to make these decisions instead of kind of just how you're feeling in that particular moment. And so taking the time to really prepare financially can be such a benefit in so many different ways. It can also save you a tremendous amount of money on the divorce process itself. Because the divorce process, if there are children involved, there's certainly the parenting piece that needs to be resolved. But a big part of the divorce settlement is coming to these financial agreements and making sure that you have the education that you need to feel very confident in those decisions. It's huge. And then it also just saves you time. If you're working with an attorney, you don't need to be going over that information with the attorney because you already have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, I would encourage you, if you have already gone through the process, I have a free ebook on my website about recovering financially. And so you can find that ebook at greatlakesdfs.com. That's my website. So it's Great Lakes Divorce Financial Solutions, greatlakesdfs.com/financial recovery. And that'll get you to the free ebook. And then for those who are moms out there, who are looking for some more help and support from other moms, I do a Facebook group called Moms Managing Money. And so it's just an open support. If you have financial questions, you can pop in the group and ask your questions there
I
too.
love that. So I will definitely put that in the comments. So if you're watching this or you're watching the recording, we'll put that in the comments for you so that you can actually just click on it, make it easy for yourself. But that's a thank you for giving that opportunity, because I think that'll be really helpful. It'll be like a breath of fresh air for the people that are feeling just weighted down by this fear of the money thing. To have any kind of options and support, I think will be really helpful for a lot of people.
Good, I'm glad.
Sarah says, would you be able to counsel someone out of state asking for a friend?
Oh, absolutely. I work with people nationwide. If you want to set up a free consultation, you just go to my website, greatlakesdfs.com, and you'll see a link there and you can schedule a 30-minute call.
Awesome. All right. So take advantage of that. We have an expert. Ask the expert all these things. So if there's no other questions, Leah, thank you again so much for coming on and spending your Wednesday night with us and hanging out with us. And I know that this information is going to be so helpful for so many people. It's going to really help them out and have them feel less fear when it comes to that whole financial part. So really appreciate it a lot.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. And for everybody else, we'll be having another Facebook Live next Wednesday is the plan. Same time, 9 p.m. And hopefully you'll be able to catch us and, make sure you share this with whomever you think this will help. So thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you all soon. Have a good night.
Good night.